today I want to talk about some stuff, and I'm not really sure what I want to talk about yet, but it has something to do with the fact that I have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder 1 with psychotic features. And my main challenge with bipolar disorder in the past 5 years has been the part about psychotic features. And the psychotic features have gotten the best of me on several occasions. And they kind of came out of nowhere, as the mania that preceded it was not really anything that seemed like mania. It was nowhere like the very first mania I had, where I was in happy land, sleeping only 2 hours a night or less for over a month. And then I had a month-long psychosis. Now, since that time, I've had 3 different hospitalizations. And they have all been for psychosis, and it has all been in the last year or so. So different things have happened in the last year that may have been contributing factors to all of a sudden experiencing more than my fair share of psychosis. Even though, in terms of quote-unquote recovery, I was doing quite well. So there's a couple of things about that. One is, it really seems to me like post-traumatic stress disorder is playing a huge part in the flare-ups, if you want to call it flare-ups, of psychosis. And the trouble with that is that it seems like medication is not really taking care of the problem. And that makes sense, because medication, although it may be helpful for me at times, it doesn't address the root cause of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And there's not much offered in the mental health system that does address that. So that's one problem. And another problem is, I was doing some work in mental health, and I feel like I was possibly triggered a little bit by some of the experiences I had supporting people. And that's not because I don't care about the people and I want to separate myself from them, and I'm trying to move away from that. But basically, I feel like I have a deep empathy for people, and seeing a person in that kind of state really resonates with my brain, because though I may have not been in that exact state myself, my brain has gone there at different times throughout my experience with mental health challenges. So there's times when I've experienced feeling like I'm a homeless person, and that's happened on more than one occasion. It seems to be a theme. In a psychosis I had in February of 2015, I crouched down and I felt like I was a homeless person, and I was eating some potatoes I had made, and I felt like it's not enough to just give people food. And then when I had a psychosis just recently in April of this year, 2016, I felt like I was a homeless person, and I had completely dissociated, and I had a sense that the people around me that I knew, I didn't really feel connected to them. I felt completely disconnected, and I felt basically like part of me was actually a homeless person, or I was simultaneously me and a homeless person somewhere downtown at the same time. And there actually was a homeless person I connected with during my very first mania in 2011, when I was wandering around like a person trying to help the world. I took a homeless person out for coffee. And this man was very nice, and I took out my notepad and he started talking, and I started writing down everything he was saying. And he was giving me instructions for what he was told by God to create for people that were homeless in order to heal from their addictions and then be reintegrated into society. And when he was giving me these instructions and I was writing it down, it felt like I wasn't writing. It felt like somebody else, like he was moving my hand by what he was saying. It felt like just one movement. He was talking and I was writing, and it wasn't like there's me writing and there's him talking. It was like one thing. And after that coffee that we had and those things I wrote down, I went to go get on transit to go back home. And all of a sudden I felt like I was freezing. Absolutely freezing. And so I jumped in a cab and paid the $50 to go home instead. And so basically why I'm saying that is that for me, there's this deep empathy that's an embodied empathy in certain moments. So certain moments, it's just connecting with a person that's homeless and him telling me this big thing that I'm supposed to create or help him create because he doesn't have any power to do so, really, in his situation. And then other times I feel like I am a homeless person and feeling exactly the agony and the pain that it's associated with that. And then this past time I felt just like totally disconnected and like I was a homeless person. And I don't know if that happens because psychosis or that state is trying to show my consciousness that we are one. It is one movement. Or if it's trying to show me, I always have this sense that any state is trying to show me something. Whether it's me as me, this supposed me that I am, or me if I'm in psychosis and I'm feeling like I am a homeless person, or if I'm in mania and I'm talking to a homeless person and getting instructions that he got from God written down. And this past time, I had a sense that maybe I am half that homeless man and half me. And this last time, I was taken to the hospital and medicated even more, and I had the worst experience of my life. And I had this gut feeling that homeless man that I took for coffee that time, he died. And I don't know if that's true, but there was a scenario around that, and I'm not sure if it's true, but I have a sense that if I don't listen to the message of we are all one, or we're all brothers and sisters, and help that population, or not even help the population, I am part of that population, because we're all human beings. So now that I'm separated from that sensation, I'm not sure if it'll come back again. And I can't know. But I have a feeling that it will come back, and it'll keep coming back until I'm aligned with whatever it is that is trying to tell me. So we often have our own personal pain and our own personal struggles. But to me, psychosis introduces common human struggles and some of the human struggles of populations that need some help. And at the same time, they have a lot to teach us, not in terms of us versus them, but there's something there that we're missing. And perhaps it's not that I'm supposed to help any sort of population, but because maybe there's nothing we can do. But just to recognize the common humanity is a start. And I do wonder about that man. And when I go back to my little life, I brush aside what he told me that day, as I feel powerless to really do anything. But at the same time, I do want to do something, but not necessarily something that would be obvious. So I'm not exactly sure what that is. But for example, I do want to go downtown and give out little granola bars or fruit bars or candy or something to people that are homeless, and not necessarily to say that that's the answer, but just to say hello and to say, I acknowledge your existence and, thank you for existing and being there and showing us that we really can survive on minimal amounts of things. And perhaps there's a lot to learn from that. But in terms of the next time I possibly go into psychosis, I fear that I will become the homeless man. I fear that maybe I could end my life and wake up as a homeless man. As when my life ends, it doesn't really end, it continues on in a different form. And not necessarily in terms of being reborn as a baby, but maybe waking up as a homeless man, the same age as I am, sort of waking up from some kind of hangover or something, like, oh, whoa, that was a weird dream. And just continuing on like that. And that could be even more reason for me to get in alignment with whatever path I'm supposed to be on in service of other people. Because one thing that bipolar disorder has taught me personally is that we are all connected and we are all sisters and brothers, and it's not necessarily perceptible on a daily basis, otherwise that would make things rather awkward. But it is perceptible sometimes, and maybe just enough, and in just enough people for that's necessary. Like maybe some people have to see that sometimes in order to balance out certain things. Who knows? It's a very elegant program that this world is, that keeps us just ignorant enough and just knowing enough to keep going. It's a lot more complicated than that. But in my first mania and that went into psychosis, I had this sense that something told me, or it wasn't a voice, but I had this feeling that we're killing each other with our thoughts, words, feelings, and actions. That those energies actually go out and mix together and create the series of events. So if I think something bad about a person, it doesn't necessarily harm that person, but that energy goes out and mixes with the whole matrix of thoughts and feelings and energy that creates whatever somewhere. Like the more I think certain thoughts, say they're bad energy thoughts, it's just contributing to that whole pile of bad energy that collectively creates so-called bad things. But I've also seen at a certain level, that may or may not be true, that there's no such thing as bad things. Even if bad things happen, it's not bad. And the person that experiences that bad thing actually experience it as not bad. It's really bizarre. And it's impossible to explain. But basically, there is nothing to fear. So those are sort of some of the things that I've had a perception of at a certain time. That may or may not be true, and it doesn't matter. Who cares? Who knows? It becomes clear to me in certain moments when perhaps that's what I need to think or feel or believe. So it's not necessarily a truth. But there are certain ones that I like to maybe write down and collect and ponder. So basically, when I was in my first state of mania and I felt like I was going to be a superhero and a superstar and all those grandiose things, looking back from my position now, I've started to ponder, well, which of those traits might I want to embody on a daily basis in life? So maybe not all of them were integrated and healthy, but maybe they could be if they were earned in a way. So if I experience myself completely different as sort of a superhero for a month 5 years ago, there's probably a certain number of those traits that I've moved towards in a way and actually embodied partially in my daily life, because it's almost like that experience created an imprint in my brain cells for it to become, again, possible for me to experience that maybe in a mania, which happened a little bit a year or so ago. It was like a hypomania probably. I was very perceptive and seeing things holistically and having insights into things that I experienced and saw, and it got a little bit out of control, and then I started to feel scared. But then the next 2 times, it wasn't really, I think it was just more trauma and built up stress that triggered psychosis, but I wasn't really feeling manic. But part of the reason could be because I was doing a lot of things and I was participating in life and in the community, and I was doing things that were creating happiness and laughter in my life. So in a way, I was able to experience myself as that manic self, or a lot of those traits I was on a daily basis that didn't really require that extra boost of mania in order for me to express and embody. So in that way, for me, that could be a blessing and a curse. It could be a blessing because I am a version of myself I like more, and that leads to a happy life. But it could be a curse in that I don't notice if it goes that 1 or 2 degrees further, and I'm bordering on psychosis. So it's hard for me to really discern the difference. And from what I've heard, a lot of people, when they start to get into that manic state, they can sense that they're feeling happy. But at the same time, who wants to stop that happy state? Who's going to go in to their doctor and say, oh my goodness, I'm feeling so happy, everything's so great, help? It doesn't necessarily happen that way. So a lot of people, from what I hear, can get really happy, and then and also from what I hear, not everybody experiences psychosis. So I guess that would mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that some people get nice and happy in terms of bipolar disorder 1. So mania, not just hypomania, but mania. And then at some point, crash and burn and plummet into a depression. The time I went to the hospital last year in February, I was having a hypomania, but I also thought that I was feeling extra sensitive because I did, in fact, go off my medication. And I did this with the help of my psychiatrist. So very, very slowly, maybe not slowly enough, over 7 months, I tapered off the medication that I'd been on for 4.5 years, or I guess it was 3.5 years at that point. And so I did have a bit of a hypomania, but it wasn't anything major. And then poof, I was in a psychosis, and it was only for, I think, 3 days. And then I ended up in the hospital, and back on all my medications I went. And after that, I did go into a pretty bad depression. And then I was put back on the antidepressant I was on, and it took a few months for me to get out of that depression. So that cycle, I was hypomanic, off my medication, and then psychosis for a couple days, in the hospital for 10 days, on some extra antipsychotics to pull me out of it, and then out of the hospital, and then I went into a depression. And then when I went to the hospital again in October of last year, I didn't have any kind of hypomania. I was just really, really busy, and then probably adding extra things on my plate that I saw, a poster for this or opportunity for that, and why not? And then there was some extra stress, and boom, I had another psychosis. But that time, I was in the hospital for, I think, 8 days, and then off work for a couple more days. And then after that, I was back to work, and I did not go into a depression. So that time it was sort of getting really busy, too stressed out, bit of a scary psychosis, feeling like I'm disconnected, scared, terrorized, and then in the hospital, and then out, and then back to work. And then this last time, in April, same thing, I was probably getting really busy with things. There was some extra stress, things happening, and I went to the hospital again. But this time I had a different psychiatrist, and I think in the other podcast I talked a little bit about what happened, but now since that experience in the hospital was so scary, terrifying, I have to take some of the aspects of my lifestyle seriously. One, not putting so many things on my plate. Two, taking some time off my particular work. And three, just really finding some things that help me de-stress and stay grounded. Because I can't take the chance that I'll have that happen again. Because I feel like next time, like I said, I might transition into actually being that homeless person. And maybe I'll think that every single time psychosis happens for me. Maybe it's a parallel reality. Maybe it's a possibility. Maybe it's a past life. Maybe it's a future life. It's hard to know. It's impossible to know. All I know is my inner experience of how it feels and how it's so real to me that it wouldn't take much for me to actually shift into that for real and not even really notice what happened. Like basically shift into being that homeless man, just walk off. There's always somebody around to help me, but if there isn't somebody around to help me, or if I choose not to call for help for some reason because I was so terrorized this past time in the hospital, I don't know what would happen, and so I don't want to find out. And that's why I want to take my own safety seriously. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I want to completely disappear from life. It's actually, I want to be more engaged in life than ever. The difference is that I want to be engaged in life exactly the way that messages, if you want to call it that, not that I heard voices, but, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I have heard some voices for sure. But basically, it's more a sense, or there was a lot of stories my brain was telling me last time, that's for sure, and those are definitely words. And I want to design my life not just to keep my stress low, but also to make sure that what I'm doing is in alignment with some of the messages or some of the higher perceptions that I've had. Because I feel like if I go towards those, then perhaps it won't have, like psychosis won't have to come back and say, hey, you're on the wrong track, or hey, that's not quite it, or hey, whatever. And I could be wrong about that, but I feel like 3 psychoses in just over a year, now is the time to test. I have time off work, and it's time to test whether I am able to stay out of the psych ward. Basically, I should be in the psych ward every 5 months or so right now. So I have a couple more months, and if I go past that, that means that I'm doing better than the previous track record of 3 hospitalizations in 14 months. That's ridiculous to me. And I don't know if I can take another one. And I was the type of person that was more than willing to go to the psych ward and sleep it off and take that extra medication and get back to myself. But last time, this most recent time, I almost lost myself completely. I was about to be medicated up, and I would have been totally flat affect, not being able to talk. And the trouble is that psychiatrists have all the power, and there's nothing that can be said to a nurse or anybody that will change the psychiatrist's mind on what they decide is the treatment plan. And that is not cool. And maybe that was part of my lesson, because before that, I always had a good, if you can have a good experience in a psych ward, I had a decent experience. They helped me from day 1 to day 10. But this last time, over 2.5 weeks in there, every single day was a fight for my life. And I forgot about that because I hadn't experienced that since my very first hospitalization in 2011. And it hurts me that people have to go through that. I managed to switch doctors and get myself out of that treatment plan, but most people who get that doctor or doctors that are similar, they don't get to switch. They don't know to ask. Or even if they do, it doesn't happen. I was lucky. So before, I was not really anti-psychiatry, and I'm not saying I am now. I don't know what I am. I don't like being anti-anything except for super anti for my nieces. But I don't know what to say now. I don't know. Something's got to change. And I don't know what. And I'm just saying that to say that was a terrible experience. And I know, or I understand that so many people have terrible experiences in there. And I did the very first time, but I figured after that experience, it was a really bad experience for months. But I recovered really well for 3.5 years. So I thought that I was done with that. That was just the first time. That was just, getting on the system or getting on meds. And I switched meds that time, and then I was doing better. I didn't imagine that 5 years later I would have such a bad experience that I'd be so terrified to go back. And terrified that I'm terrified to go back because there's not really much else out there. So, again, that's why I'm taking this lifestyle design, stress-free, as much as possible, seriously, because I can't take that again, especially in a few months' time, which is kind of the pattern right now for me. And I want to break that pattern. So I'm going to be doing a lot of fun things. And actually, one thing I did today was I bought a Groupon for stand-up paddle boarding. I've never tried it. It was only $14. That's cheap. And it's 1 hour lesson and then 1 hour paddling around. And that's something I did for myself. But at the same time, I thought, could this be a sign that I'm going to be buying this and buying that? And, what else can I do? And all of a sudden, I have 50 Groupons and I'm in the hospital while they're all expiring, which happens for me as well. I tend to go to the hospital and then miss out on stuff that I'd planned. So I can't plan too far ahead, and I can't invest too much in too many things. And these are all things that I need to be aware of in myself. And it's just, I guess, part of having this bipolar diagnosis. And I don't really know what bipolar disorder is exactly, but I do know what it's like to have a diagnosis. And yeah, if you're having a rough time, I feel for you. if you're having a good time, I feel for you too. I feel like having bipolar disorder gives me access to a whole spectrum of human consciousness and emotions and experiences and times and places that I go without really going anywhere. I go inside. And there's a lot in there. And it would be cool to talk about some of these experiences because there's not really that much out there for talking about it, because most of the time it's medicalized and it's seen as a symptom. And it would be good to talk about it in terms of just inner experience, like talking about one's dreams or sharing, oh, I had this dream last night, like, oh, I had this hallucination last night, which who knows if it's a hallucination at all. It could be something else. And if it is or not, I'm not sure if it matters. I'm really trying to look at some of the things I've experienced and some of the things that I hold on to and translate them into something that's actually usable or pertinent to daily life. Because otherwise it's just talking about dreams or about things that they're real for me in terms of experience, inner experience. But if I can translate them into reality as something that's trying to tell me something about reality or something that's usable in reality, then maybe it'll go away. So I had that experience with the homeless man. Well, now what? And that's something that I usually just forget about. But it's sort of, if I could imagine that I was able to create this place that he was talking about for homeless people to go and heal, that would be incredible. And maybe it is something I can do one day. It's not something I can do tomorrow, but by having that in mind as something that's possible in reality versus just saying, well, I had this weird experience where this man told me this stuff. What he told me is in line with the so-called embodied hallucinations or delusions that I've had in each preceding or proceeding psychosis experience since then. So if I put those together, then they're congruent, and so maybe that means something. And maybe I can't do that tomorrow, but I can go to the downtown area and give out those bars, not necessarily thinking it'll solve the problem, but just as also an acknowledgement that, yes, I did listen to that homeless man that day. He did have my complete attention, and I did acknowledge what he said, and it's still in my mind, and it's still in my heart. And there's nothing I'd love more to create that space, because perhaps I'll use it one day. Maybe in my next life. Maybe I'm supposed to create this for myself in my next life. Just like maybe I would listen to this in my next life and not really know that I was talking to myself. The next version of myself who is not yet born yet. And I don't even care if I reincarnate or not. Or even when I say my next life, that could just be a life that happens, that starts the moment I die, and it might have nothing to do with me. Well, it doesn't have anything to do with me as a conscious ego. It's more the consciousness, which is, who knows what the heck that is. So it's all very mysterious, which, of course, it has to be. Otherwise, if we actually knew what was going to happen, there would be no real point in doing anything or in taking the next step, because we would know the next step before we took it, and that would make it ridiculous. So I didn't really know where I was going to go with things today, but I did talk about psychosis, and I can hear in my tone even, it's kind of heavy, and that all sounded very heavy, but my heart feels heavy with things that happen to people in the psych ward and things that are happening to homeless people who, those are the people that choose maybe not to go to the psych ward, and they choose to take the medications that are available on the streets that are not patented and pharmaceuticalized, but often have similar or better effects. I know the medication I take would not be able to be sellable on the street. Nobody would buy that crap. So, and then the people that choose the psych ward, whoa, they're in for a rough ride too. And I have a family who takes me to the psych ward, meaning very well. They mean well. They take me there. And next time, I don't know if I'll call them for help, because I know where they're going to take me. And I feel like I just need safe space, time, love, and understanding, and not medication. But there's not really that available. Maybe one day we'll have more peer respite centers. There's a lot of information out there, or just places that don't use medication. I know a place in the States opened up recently. I believe there's no medications there, or less medications. So it's headed in the right direction, and I don't think things like that will happen in time for my life. But I would be very content if in, 10, 15 years that was more available for people. And God forbid anyone in the next generation need these types of services. They're a lot better and a lot more understanding. What would be even better is that if we were able to reorient society in a way that everyone was just unconditionally loved as who they are, and then there would be no reason for all this stuff in the psyche to get all messed up. Maybe sometimes, but a lot less often, I would think. But it's okay, because the universe always has our back, even if it doesn't seem like it. There's certain things going on in the world that we think, wow, that's bad. But they're actually the universe at work. And that would be a topic for a different day. But next time, I think I want to go into some more positive things, because even though I was just in the psych ward a month and a half ago, the great thing about building lots of good stuff into one's life, building a full life, is that not much of it disappears after a trip to the psych ward, depending on what it is, of course. And so luckily this time I haven't gone into a depression, just no real mania, but psychosis, which is making me think it's more to do with the PTSD and dissociation, which I'm going to do something to try to fix it. I'm going to go to do hypnosis, and I don't know if it's going to fix it. It's a bit of an investment money-wise, but I don't care. I've already decided I'm going to do it. And once I decide I'm going to do something, even if it doesn't do anything and I waste that money, I don't care, because I've already decided. Maybe that's something to do with bipolar, I'm not sure. But It's definitely a worthwhile investment for me. And it's not that I can afford it. I have a line of credit, and that helps me afford things that I really shouldn't spend money on. But I do want to invest in myself because I do love myself. I don't want to go back to the psych ward, and I think it may help. And if it doesn't help, I will learn something. And I love to learn. I will share a bit about that if I do in fact do it, which I am planning to do. So anyways, I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great night. More positive things to come next time. I'm not sure what, but there's lots of positive things on the go. And I see you as a friend, as a peer. We're both, even though we don't have the same experiences, and I really hope I didn't offend you by anything I said, because I mean well, and deep down inside, we're all the same. And I really want everyone to be healthy and happy and well. And just feel free to reach out. We can help each other. We can help each other more than some of the people that are trying to help us out there. They don't know how to help. But we're all in this together. All right. Peace out.